Hello, my name is Alex Araya, and this is my evaluation of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was born November 11th, 1922 in Indianapolis, Indiana. He fought in World War II, was captured as a prisoner of war, and he was sent to Dresden, Germany. He is the author of many famous novels and plays. He's also a known essayist. He's an activist and spokesperson for preservation of constitutional freedoms, nuclear arms control, and environmentalist causes. Why I chose Slaughterhouse-Five. It is considered a modern American classic, and it is taught in many classrooms throughout the country. It utilizes time travel as a plot device, which is a particular favorite of mine, particularly in science fiction. And it has an inventive storytelling mechanic in which it tells the story out of chronological order. So at points, Billy Pilgrim will be a 22-year-old man at war, or a man in his middle ages on a faraway planet. It's a social commentary. It speaks volumes about the horrors of war, the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it happened to be published during the height of the Vietnam War, so it became a very key social commentary on that particular war as well. The destructive nature of war is a common theme throughout this book. Setting is used to create a contrast after life-altering trauma. And Billy Pilgrim as a character is used in a very unconventional way. The story follows Billy Pilgrim, at times a 21-year-old soldier during World War II, at other times a married family man and an optometrist, and even other times a middle-aged man after a life-changing event. These parts of Billy's life are told non-chronologically. Pilgrim served on the front lines in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium for the U.S. Army. Very soon after, while behind enemy lines, he is taken as a prisoner of war by Germany, along with other soldiers. This is the first time our protagonist experiences a time shift, something that will occur throughout the novel. Billy sees the entire span of his life in one go. While held captive by the Germans, his fellow soldier Ronald Weary dies from gangrene. Paul Lazaro, a prisoner who meets the men on the train, blames Billy for Roland's death. Lazaro vows to seek and kill Pilgrim. Billy travels via boxcar to a prisoner of war camp in Germany. The Americans are welcomed with a banquet for the officers, as provided by the British prisoners of war. To lighten the mood, officers perform Cinderella, during which Billy has a mental episode. This sends him on a voyage through time. He wakes up in 1948, where he is in a veterans hospital's mental ward. Back in the 1945 timeline, the prisoners of war are sent to Dresden, Germany. There they are taken to a labor camp in an abandoned slaughterhouse. The city is carpet-bombed by Allied troops. Billy survives the attack by hiding in a meat locker. They emerge to a decimated Dresden and are forced to remove bodies from the wreckage. Soon, the Germans are captured and Billy is freed. Back in 1948, where Billy has committed himself to a mental ward. He has gone to optometry school after the war, but could not shake his PTSD. While in the hospital, Billy is shown the science fiction novels of a little-known author, Kilgore Trout, by a fellow patient. Though Trout's books aren't very well written, Billy finds them clever. Billy marries a woman named Valencia Merble, whose father runs the optometry school where Billy attends, and Pilgrim becomes an optometrist, and he and Valencia have 2 children. Later, on his daughter's wedding night, Billy is abducted by an alien spaceship and taken to the faraway planet of Tralfamadore. These creatures experience all time simultaneously and have a fatalistic view of life. He meets another abductee, movie star Montana Wildhack, and they live in a zoo-like environment together. After falling in love and having a baby together, Billy is sent to his own past and future to live his life anachronistically. In 1968, a middle-aged Billy survives a plane crash. While frantically en route to the hospital to visit Billy, his wife crashes her car and later dies of a carbon monoxide poisoning. Back at his home in Ilium, New York, he reveals his life on Tralfamadore to his daughter, but he is thought to be insane. Unfazed, Pilgrim spreads his message in newspapers and on a talk show, explaining that the Tralfamadorian ideas of time, that death and free will are but an illusion. While giving a talk in Chicago about his experiences on Tralfamadore, Billy prophesizes that Paul Lazzaro would murder him. The crowd urges him to do something about it, but Billy points out that this contrasts with the Tralfamadorian fatalist beliefs of time, death, and self. He is later killed by one of Lazzaro's henchmen. Slaughterhouse-Five was written immediately after Vonnegut experienced the bombing of Dresden. Published 25 years after the end of World War II, Slaughterhouse-Five shows just how stark and impactful the horrific events of the war were. It was published during the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement, which made its sentiment particularly relevant. Throughout the story, there is a theme of the destructiveness of war. Many of Pilgrim's time shifts take him back to the time of his trauma. The novel uses one of the most violent events in the history of Europe, the bombing of Dresden, as a vehicle to sow blatant anti-war ideas. Whether he is taking swimming lessons or while on planet Tralfamadore, Billy keeps returning to his horrific experiences during World War II, and this implies the ever-reaching and permanent effects of war on the human psyche. The horrors of war have rendered Billy Pilgrim unstuck in time, a childhood both lost by war but made permanent in his psyche due to his trauma. War has taken away part of Billy that seems to keep him numb, sort of like he's just going through the motions of life without taking the reins. His use of the alien planet Tralfamadore and its science fiction themes as rhetorical devices showed just how disjointed Billy Pilgrim's mind has become as a result of the war. This exotic alien location, many light years from Earth, could very well be a coping mechanism for Pilgrim's PTSD. Germany and the fictional town of Ilium, New York, are the places that most shape our protagonist. Vonnegut sets Ilium as a comfortable place for Billy, and it represents his life pre-war. This sets our metric for perceiving his change after he gets PTSD. Kurt Vonnegut uses the character of Billy Pilgrim not to tell his own story exactly, but to tell the story of a battle-worn soldier. Though Vonnegut also experienced the bombing of Dresden, Billy's story is one of living a life with PTSD. Even at his desk, safe at work, he is very easily startled by a passing siren. Throughout the novel, Billy rarely has a hand in forging his own path, which makes for an interesting interpretation of a character. We're watching the events unfold just as Billy did, and we as the reader have about as much influence on what happens as Billy does during his major life events. He's drafted into war. He didn't choose to go. He's even abducted by aliens against his will. It seems that even though Billy Pilgrim is the protagonist of Slaughterhouse-Five, perhaps fate is the main character. In conclusion, Slaughterhouse-Five is a fascinating story that has a very inventive take on chronology and storytelling. It uses abstract representation to describe a very abstract idea, the product of which feels very concrete. This interesting combination produces what seems like a very tangible representation of the experience of PTSD. Vonnegut has a unique dual qualification to tell this story, both as a veteran and as an accomplished storyteller.